Hey guys, I'm your host Smitha and welcome to Journey Podcast, your weekly podcast on transformational journeys.
The purpose for generational survivors is to, and I wanted this to be a global platform, is to bring awareness to other survivors that are generational survivors.
Exactly.
And also give and provide resources as well as lobbying for change
Hmm. Hmm.
in the laws pertaining to domestic violence, child molestation, sexual assault. That is so vital.
Yep.
Because some of the laws, when you read them, they're so off, and it's like these perpetrators are just continuously doing these things and getting away with them because the penalties are not stiff enough.
Penalties are not there, and also the other thing that I actually like while talking to people like you on the show before, what I understood is like there are a lot of gaps in even understanding what has gone through. For example, when you mentioned it to a police officer that this is what happened, and your mother denied it right then and there. So how are they going to proceed just by hearing their a small kid's voices?
Right.
You you have to look at it in a perspective like yes, the child is not going to make up the complete story. If you are asking them the details, they can't make up the details because they don't know what is happening.
Exactly.
But if you are able to give that level of detail, there has to be some truth towards it. If you can't really fight for it, at least let someone else help for through that situation.
Exactly.
You
And
being a law enforcement officer, I'm sorry, you being a law enforcement officer, have you ever seen anybody with this kind of a situation coming to you for helping them?
so I've dealt with some domestic violence cases, but I've really never encountered anything much like mine where the mother didn't believe the child, but I really didn't interact with too many child molestation cases either.
Hmm.
Because with a police officer, and this is where I feel like things need to change within law enforcement. Because as a police officer, we dealt with the surface.
Yep.
We dealt with the victim, we dealt with the perpetrator. If they were children in there, we didn't question the children. We didn't know what was going on in the home per se, outside of the abuse that the victim was sharing with us.
Hmm.
And we didn't ask about the children really. We were concentrating on the victim,
Hmm.
perpetrator. So, we were like this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
oftentimes the children get left out,
Yes.
and that shouldn't be. Immediately when there's a domestic violence case, and I think some things have changed now. I want to say some things that have changed where they're sending people in to investigate. I want to say I don't know all the protocol now because I've been out of law enforcement for a while, but I know that they focus on the survivor or the victim at that point, the victim and the perpetrator.
Hmm.
Now, what I do when women reach out to me and they say, I want to get out, I need to get my children and my family out of there.
Hmm.
One of the questions I ask is he hurting the children as well?
Hmm.
Is he hurting them? Do you know if he's hurting them? You know, I mean, he's hurting them because he's hurting them mentally.
Mentally.
Physically, is he touching them? Is he abusing them as well on a physical level?
Yep.
Because on a mental level, it's so that the hurt is already done, the
Yep.
harm is already done.
Yep.
And I think that sometimes we take that for granted.
So true. Because you're not seeing it outside. You don't know the level of the trauma that is actually creating inside.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And the reason why I say that is because even after, and this was in my case, because my mother, I don't know if my mother didn't want to recognize that there was a problem. So I never received therapy. Um, Immediately after that, I think it was like a month later when my dad was able to come and pack me up and take me. During that time frame that I was in the house, she really didn't speak to me. Um, my dad came, got me, but even in my dad's home, I didn't receive therapy. He didn't. I don't know if there's something, and this is something that the African American culture, like, they really don't believe in therapists. A lot of African American families.
Even Indian culture don't believe in therapy or like counseling or any of the mental health is not a issue at all. There is a joke that runs around in social media for Indian culture saying like if you go and tell your parents, mom or dad, I'm going through something like this, I need help, the answer would be like, it's a meme, it's a joke that they
Right.
forwarded. The answer would be like, go drink some water and pray. That is
Exactly.
where we are, because mental health is not a thing at all.
Things like that need to change. And that's another reason for generational survivors, because we have to continue to talk about these things that are not commonly discussed.
Yep,
Child molestation is not sexy. Domestic violence is not sexy. It's not a sexy topic. Nobody wants to touch it.
definitely.
They're doing a little more with domestic violence, but when it comes to child molestation, you rarely hear about it at all.
You don't hear about it, a lot of people talking about it, but the statistics, if you look at like 1 out of 5 girl children, no, 4 girl children,
Mhm.
and 1 out of 5 boys. I mean, the stats are like so high, but nobody wants to even do anything about it.
No, no, nobody wants to touch that topic. And until conversation is had, until we are are ongoing with it, and we're looking at what avenues we need to take
Yep,
to really rectify this situation is always going to be an epidemic,
yep,
because I feel like that's an epidemic within itself.
yep,
So for me, I fight for just cause.
yep,
I fight for the survivors, for the ones who are still being victimized, for the children who don't have voices.
yep,
That's who I fight for, because the child is left without a voice
yep,
in many cases. And in many cases, it becomes too late.
yes, yes, it is.
And that has to end. That must stop now.
How many children are really like standing up for themselves even at a later life, in their whole life? Like they can't really come out and say like after 30 years they can't come out and say like, yeah, something happened to me long back, but they still struggle with those things inside.
I'm, I'm going to tell you something. So I've had so many people say to me, why, what, why? It's so many women who've been molested, who've been raped. You're not the only one. I never said I was the only one. So
Exactly. That too.
why is your this so important to you?
And
Why wouldn't it be?
yeah, yeah.
It's,
For you to
you
hear
know why?
it, it might be 1 among 10, but for me, I'm the only one.
I'm the only one. So why wouldn't it be important to me? Oh, some people just move on and forget about it.
Yep,
That's
you can.
that's a that's fact, that's fiction. People don't move on and forget about it.
Exactly. It's
They move on and they try to bury it
yep,
so that they can move on, but it's still there because
yep,
they haven't dealt with it. So don't be offended by what I'm doing because I'm dealing with mine in an outward way.
yep.
A part of my healing process, Smitha, was coming out and sharing my story.
Absolutely agree with that. Yes.
That's a part of the healing process. That's a part of the journey that most of us have to. get on to really begin to heal. If I'm unable to share my testimony, if I'm unable to share my story, then I'm still being held in chains and bondage.
Yep.
And I'm not going to be held in hostage to my pain.
Yep. As you mentioned, yes, definitely it's not a sexy topic, but again, if you don't want to share out with everybody around the world, but yeah, fine, share it with at least one person or go for a therapy, get some help, take that step, whatever is going to help you to come out of that.
Right. Right. You don't have to do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Everyone,
Some,
I'm me, you know. You may handle yours in a different way, but you still need to get help. Mentally, you have been traumatized, and the mental abuse is longer than the physical abuse. Because, see, with the physical abuse, maybe you can heal from it. Prayerfully, you did not get maimed in the situation
yep.
and lose a body part. So, mentally, it stays with you
Yep.
unless you start to deal with it.
100%.
So, it's so much that needs to be done when it comes to domestic abuse, child molestation, sexual assault. It's so much that needs to be done.
Yep.
I don't think there's enough advocates. I was told that it's so many of y'all doing the same thing. You got Me Too, you got this. It's just not enough. So what if there's a Me Too? So what if they have all these different advocacy agencies? There's still not enough of us advocating for change in policy,
Yep.
having the discussions, having the unwanted talk. We have a long journey ahead of us. We
100%.
really do. The my mission has become clear to me, and as your mission has become clear to you.
Yep.
And I think that and this is not only for survivors of this is for people who this has never even impacted. I can tell you that I talked to um a woman who when she heard my story, she said, I've never heard of such a thing. She says, I don't know anyone who's going through what you went through. She said, I can't even fathom. She said, I can't even relate. So she
What
wanted me to
about,
discuss, it bothered her so much about my mother not believing me, the molestation. She knows about domestic violence, obviously, but
yes.
she said to me, she said, I don't know anyone who's been through this. I said, you think you don't know anyone who's been through it. I said, it could be someone in your circle right now that is going through it. And it may not even be physical, it may just be mental. It may just be mental.
Yep.
And I said, you would be surprised.
Hmm. So
I
true.
said, domestic violence knows no race. It knows no finances. It doesn't care if you're poor, it doesn't care if you're rich, wealthy,
Yep.
doesn't care if you're black, white, Asian, Indian,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It does not matter because it affects us all. And even the ones that it hasn't happened to, and this is what I said on a panel that I was on, even the ones that it hasn't happened to, it affects them. Because when you're dealing with domestic abuse and you're dealing with children growing up in a an abusive household, and those children grow up to be adults, those children are growing up with mental and physical health issues.
Yep.
And it's called ACEs,
Yep.
adverse childhood experiences, where they have an indicator and they ask these questions. A lot of mental health professionals now have really done. I applaud it. And if you don't know who she is, Nadine Burke, Dr. Nadine Burke
Mm-hmm.
Harris, please look her up.
Sure.
She really owned into the research of ACEs and was able to really she really changed how they look at dealing with trauma from a child's perspective, and how identifying that trauma with some of the mental and physical health issues
Exactly. Exactly.
that we're experiencing. Because I know for myself, I have a lot of health issues on a mental and physical level that I'm dealing with. And I know for a fact that a lot of that was not gene related,
No,
but
it's
a lot of those issues are because of the trauma that I've suffered.
yep. Yep.
And so if you think that just because you weren't involved in a domesticated situation where it became violent, abusive, that it doesn't involve you, you're wrong, because healthcare costs are being driven upward
Yep. Yep.
because of the amount of trauma that a child has impacted on them as a child turning into an adult with all these healthcare issues.
Yep.
So what do you think that does? That drives up healthcare costs.
It's interesting when you mentioned about ACE. I told you like I have few people that were on the show who were talking about child sexual abuse topic. And
Mhm.
one of the ladies actually working on this. I mentioned her to you, Mary Beth. And she spoke about ACEs on a full episode.
Oh,
So
I
he
would love to hear her. Oh, I would love to
She
hear
gave
her.
a lot of information. She's a mother of two children who had gone through this. So
Wow.
I got about this information from her from a perspective of being a parent,
Right.
not knowing when it is happening, not being able to identify when it was happening.
Mhm.
After the fact, when the child was explaining that, how far she went to help her kids, what changes she was able to like give or get from the people around, or the
Right.
support that she was able to. That's why, like when I'm talking to you, if you could explain a little more from law enforcement perspective about this subject specifically, like about child molestation or sexual abuse, what are the gaps or like what are the things that you might have seen? Because as I mentioned, I got the information from a parent perspective from her. There is another person by name Kevin Barheim. He is he is in the education department. So I got the information from him for what are the gaps in the education department that
Right.
he found, because he was a survivor himself. So when
Oh,
he started
wow.
talking about his story, being in education department, I
Right.
would understand the gaps from that perspective. And you being here today, and there is another woman who was sharing that she runs an NGO, I believe, and
Mhm.
she's running like 24/7 call services for the people who are
Wow.
victims. So I was like, yeah, getting her perspectives are like her support, her help that she can do. She's also a survivor again. So yeah, you being into the same place, if you can give a little more light onto the same subject from your perspective, working in law enforcement. Yeah.
So what I will tell you is, when I was a law enforcement officer, dealing with the domestic violence cases, I saw that a lot of our male officers, especially, really didn't take it seriously when we arrived on scene, and it was a domesticated situation. Some of them just really didn't have the heart to deal with it.
Hmm.
Um, so I think, in looking at some of the males that I saw dealing with the situation, first of all, I feel like there should be more education there in law enforcement. I think police officers, matter of fact, I know law enforcement officers need to become more educated. And they do have trainings now, but when I say educated, I feel as though law enforcement officers should all have a degree.
Hmm.
That's number one.
Hmm.
And a degree in dealing with, especially when you're talking about psychology of the mind, different things like that. they should have some sort of requirements or credentials based on the social structure of domestic abuse,
Hmm.
child molestation.
Hmm.
They should be mandated to have certain certifications in certain issues that you're consistently going to run into, because that only sharpens your skills
Yep.
and the language that you use. See, people don't understand,
So
and
important. Yes.
it's very important that they have the language and the tools to go into that situation knowing, first of all, what to identify when you go into a home. Because when you go into a home and you're trying to break up a situation that's going on, you also have to have a keen eye to
Hmm.
see outside of what's in front of you.
Yep.
So you have to know, you have to be able to look at a child and see something. You understand? You have to look, you have to be able to look outside of exactly what's in front of you.
Yep.
And you also need to know what language to use, because some officers don't know how to talk to, at that time, the victim.
Yep. Yep.
And even for that case, the perpetrator.
Yep.
So I really believe that there should be more education geared towards domestic abuse, sexual assault, rape,
Hmm.
domestic violence.
Hmm.
Um, Law enforcement officers are the first on scene.
Yes.
They can make the difference. That's the reason why they need to know the language to speak
Yep.
to a victim going through,
Hmm.
and even the language to speak to the perpetrator. And that's where I see that there's a gap.
Hmm.
Some officers know, and they know how to go into the situation, and some officers are clueless.
Hmm. Hmm.
That makes a world of difference. You can't afford to lose anyone. Your job is to save lives. And
Yep.
I'm not saying you're not going to lose, but if you are to lose, don't let it be because you weren't knowledgeable and you didn't have the tools
Yep.
to really go into that situation and know what you're supposed to do.
Yep.
And I think a lot of officers take it as a joke, is that, oh, we respond to this house all the time.
Hmm.
She's not going to press charges, so it's just a waste of our time. So when you start thinking like that, when you get that mentality,
Yeah. Yeah.
that changes the dynamics, because it changes how you go into the situation
Yep.
and what language you use and how you care for the situation. It changes how you see the situation.
Hmm.
And understand me, there have been several times where I have been frustrated because we have gone to court and the victim does not show up, and the lawyer's like, I don't I don't know.
Hmm.
We have no case. But you have to also understand that woman's psyche. I told you what my mother did.
Yep.
She called him and told him where we were.
Yep.
And at the time I was a child, I didn't understand. But as an adult and doing my research and going through, I understand.
Yep.
So I think law enforcement needs to, like I said, they need to become more certified in
Yep.
those vital areas. They should be required to have, each officer should be required to have a certification in those areas. Each officer, it should be mandated. Not just a little, not when we going through the academy, because I went through the academy and they did a little week session on it or what have you. No. We need to have certifications in those vital areas.
Hmm.
And I think it starts there. And it also, and also you know dealing with the woman, the men needs, a lot of men need the sensitivity training.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? Because You can cause the victim to shut down just by, again, the language that you're using
Yep.
and how you go into the situation.
Yep.
So that's how I feel like law enforcement is kind of failing in that area. And there is something that they can do about it. You know, we have to restructure how law enforcement is being trained. Number one, first of all, we're not trained long enough. To me, you're going out there to you're first of all, you have to use a gun, you have to protect and serve, so you have weapons.
Hmm.
And a couple of weeks in the academy is just not enough. I think it was like 3 months, three to
Hmm.
4 months or something like that. I think we did, and it's just not enough. It's not enough training there. Not enough to have you go out, especially. I think the youngest age is like 19 that you can become a 19, 20 that you become a police officer in some states.
Oh, okay.
That's too young.
Yep.
You don't know enough to go into a situation to handle a domestic violence or any case for that matter.
Yep. Yep.
That's just way too young. You're not even matured enough.
Yep.
You're still
Growing, in the
becoming,
process of growing.
becoming.
Yeah.
Right, you're still becoming. And you know, I had someone say, well, if they're young enough to serve in the military, then they're young enough to serve as a law enforcement officer. I don't believe that they should go into the military that young.
Yep.
To be honest with you, I think it's too young. They're not ready. They're not matured enough. But again, we're dealing with government now, economics, social economics. So
Hmm.
all of that boils down to capitalism, money.
I have a question, not about this topic, about the previous one when I was asking about the law enforcement help. When let's say, for example, you got into a domestic violence case or like a child abuse case, apart from actually trying to collect the evidence and trying to talk to the victim or the perpetrator, for example,
Mhm.
is there any other help or services that you actually offer to those people?
So I know in my department uh we had several resources that we can pull from.
Hmm.
And we were a smaller, I started at an NYPD, but I ended up retiring from Williamsburg. And when NYPD, I was a school safety officer on task force, and I dealt with a lot of children there too.
Hmm.
But with Williamsburg, um, we were a smaller police department in Virginia, and we did have some resources that we could give. Now, here's the kicker: did everyone tell the victim about the resources?
Hmm.
Probably not.
That's why I asked that question. I don't think anybody is talking
Oh,
about the resources available outside to get help.
but you don't have, again, knowing the language is so important because
Yep.
the language requires you to know what resources are available and to share those resources with those victims so that they can get the proper help that they need. And see, somebody will look at this later on and say, oh, we give out resources. No, you don't. No, you don't. 85% of police departments, I'm throwing a number out there. I'm just going to say 85%. They're not giving out resources. Half the time, the police officer doesn't even want to deal with the paperwork.
Hmm.
And I'm just being serious. You have very few police officers who are doing their jobs correctly. Let's come on, let's look at it. Very few that are really, a law enforcement officer does not get paid much money.
Hmm.
So you either love this job because you love this job and you got into this position because you really want to help to save lives. You really love the people. You want to make sure that the communities are living well and healthy.
Hmm.
Or you got into this job because this is the job that you got into.
Hmm.
And then you see, you can tell the difference
Yeah.
in the officer. You can tell who really is invested in that job, and you could tell the ones who are just in the job just to be there for a paycheck.
Perfect. Yeah.
you know? So yeah, no, they're not always giving out resources, Smitha. They're
Hmm.
not. And
Hmm.
another breakdown in the system. That's another breakdown in the system.
You don't have to separately give out the information. At least do you accept if someone else is actually, let's say for example, the other lady that I was, Jolene Beckers, she is connected with the law enforcement team in her place, and she is putting herself out saying like, I can give this kind of help. So if somebody is there with you, just pass on my number or like connect them with me so that I can carry out with them, I can be there with them until they say like, I don't need anybody's help, I'm fine right now.
Right.
So do you guys even accept that kind of a thing, and how far do you accept?
I I don't see, every police department has their policies. I would tell you something about I will share with you Newport News Police Department. They really shocked me. I love what they did. They got together and they received a grant. They took that grant money and they formed a civilian domestic violence task force.
Wow.
I thought that was phenomenal. And the
Wow.
reason why is because you have civilians, survivors,
Yes.
who some of them, some have the education, the background, some are just, they went through it and they are advocates for it. So they are very knowledgeable,
Mm.
but they have a task force geared es- especially for domestic violence. And I thought that was phenomenal. I think that every police department should have a civilian task force to deal with that. So like you go on a you go you a police, for instance, a police officer arrives on scene. They've been called to a domestic violence a call. They arrive on scene. They get the people separated. You know, now they have to take them in. The domestic violence task force should be there waiting for them. Someone from the task force should be there waiting for them so that they can speak to especially the victim. You see what I'm saying?
It's interesting when you're mentioning like your civilian people helping other people, because
Mhm.
they are survivors themselves. Even if somebody is talking to me right now, I can easily understand whether they are really telling the truth or
Mhm.
whether they just wanted to like project themselves in a different way, wanted to get that attention or whatever. And then
Right.
I have heard people like that. And some people will be like straight off coming out when they talk about like, yeah, they don't want to stay in their marriage and they are going through a lot of things, blah, blah, blah. There won't be any scenario they can pinpoint and say like, yeah, this is what my pain point is. But they'll be going on and on and on saying like, I don't like it. This is what happening, the blah, blah, blah. But end of the conversation, somewhere you will definitely understand, you being a survivor like I being a survivor,
Mhm.
you will understand what is their motive behind their talk,
Right.
whether it
Right.
is attention, whether it is, I have heard a couple of girls, I don't want to say the names, but
Mhm.
they were talking to me on and on, like I might have spoke like 5 6 times with them, each time more than an hour or so. On the first conversation itself, I know she's not telling the whole truth.
Mm.
Second conversation, I know she's not actually needing my help in what I wanted to help with, or she don't want to come out of that marriage because she's not able to survive. It's nothing. By end of that fourth or fifth call, I believe, like I was able to understand completely what she wanted is she wanted to break that marriage and wanted to get the financial support for her
Mhm.
because the husband was very well off. She wanted to get that part of amount for her. She wanted to live her life happy.
Wow.
But she made up so much of a story behind the scenes to get to that point where she need a legal advice or a help, how I can help her, giving a suggestion like how she'll be able to get that money from him. I'm
Wow.
like, I am no gold digger. So yeah, please, that's not my area, that's not my topic. If
Right.
you really need help, I can try to help, or if I'm not helping, I can at least hear you out. I'm fine with that,
Right.
but I'm not here. So when you're mentioning like, yeah, civilian who are real survivors, we being survivors, I think most of us will have that instinct to identify actual person who is actually hurting behind the scenes, or just wanted that attention, or like, yeah, wanted to grab everybody and just keep talking about it. Somebody want like, they want to be famous for no reason.
Right.
They just like
Exactly.
a story and keep talking about it, talking about it. If you really like get to a point, like I want a specific scenario that you can explain me, or like what is that specific pain point that you are looking, there won't be any matter that you are actually like, yeah, listening there.
Ex- Exactly. I'm going to talk a little bit now about my transformation
Mm,
and how I got to this part of this portion of my life. It was no easy journey for me.
I,
Um,
yes.
the transformation was, I think, the hardest part of my journey because I was so broken and I didn't even realize it. Even as a police officer, I was really broken, Smitha,
Mm,
really broken. And I did not know. Here I thought that, yeah, I'm in this position, I'm saving lives, go, go, go. But when I started getting therapy, my therapist was able to transcend to me and just let me know, like, you are on a high when
yeah.
you're in this position. And she said that's borderline bipolarism.
Wow.
Right. So she revealed that to me, that I was on the spectrum.
Mm,
And that is the reason why I chose such a flighty job. Because when I'm on a high, I'm on a high. But
mm,
when I hit a low, I hit a low.
mm.
And I needed a lot of, I first of all, I couldn't understand. I'm like, so you're telling me I'm sick? What am I, crazy? What yeah, because as a law enforcement
Yep.
officer, you don't want that stigma.
Yeah.
We're carrying a gun. So when the therapist revealed to me that I was on the spectrum and stated that we have to address this issue, immediately I thought, I can't let my job know. They're gonna terminate me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now here's another issue I'm dealing with. I'm a woman in law enforcement, with this stigma, this mental illness.
Mm,
How do you deal with that?
mm.
How am I going to be effective at my job? How effective am I going to be? So now I'm dealing with the trauma. I'm
Yep.
dealing with trying to figure out who I am because now you've thrown something else my way, and I'm a parent, I'm a mother, and I'm like, am I going to be able to parent my children?
Yep.
And then within all of that, I finally did get married to my husband now. I was told years ago prior to him that I would never be a wife. I would always be a side piece
Why is that? Who
because
gave that impression to you?
the person that I was dealing with was broken. So broke and hurt people, and he wanted to hurt me. So he knew he couldn't hurt me physically,
Hmm.
but mentally, he knew that I was already a broken person.
Hmm.
So he would say little things that would really tear me up on the inside.
That keep
So,
triggering those. Yeah.
right. So, a part of my transformation, and this is something that I had to learn, I had to heal from within, and
Yeah.
I really had to accept all of me.
Yep.
And Smitha, that was very hard for me to do because I saw so much fault in myself.
Yep.
I carried guilt. I carried shame. I was ashamed of the things that happened to me.
Yep.
And then after being told about the mental illness, I was more ashamed. How are people going to perceive me? How are they going to look at me?
Yep.
Are people going to respect me? Are they going to take me seriously? All of these things ran through my mind. And I had to lay everything down and I had to see me outside of me, if that
That.
makes any sense.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
I had to see me outside of me.
Hmm.
And when I did that, and I can truly look at myself, I mean, one day, I'm going to tell you, it was something that I did. One day, I got up and I went to the bathroom And I remember looking in the mirror and just staring at myself. And I was just staring and looking. And it was as though I was trying to see through that person in the mirror because I didn't recognize myself.
Mm,
I didn't. I was totally like oblivious to who she was.
mm.
And I asked God, who am I? And then I asked the person in the mirror, who are you? And I burst out crying. I cried and I bawled like a baby.
I get that. Mm.
I cried from the inside out.
Yep.
The pain was so deeply held within me. I didn't realize how hurt and broken I was. And I bawled and I just kept shouting, who are you? And I was saying it out loud, who are you? And it was like I was trying to make myself hear myself.
Yep.
And it was the weirdest thing for me, but it was also a revelation.
Mm.
Because after I did that, and it seemed like everything that was yucky started to, it was like I was regurgitating it. It was coming out. And I needed the release. And after I calmed down, after shouting at myself, and then I calmed down and I just stood there and I was looking in my eyes and I asked God, I said, Lord, I need you.
Mm.
I left you. You never left me. I realized that.
Mm. Mm.
And something in me opened up like an airway. It
Mm.
was as though my diaphragm expanded and I could breathe again. It's like that I needed that release. And now you can breathe. Be who you are. Those are the words that I heard. I don't know if it was a subconscious thing.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yep.
But I heard be who you are.
Mm.
And even with that being said, Smitha, I still had a long road to recovery.
Of course, it's definitely it'll never be like a overnight change, or like the minute you felt that coming out, it doesn't matter. Like it will take one day. No, it will take time to heal. It's a process.
It is a process. And the one thing I don't like is when people say, oh my gosh, just get over it. Get over it already.
I heard that too. And
Get
then
over
another dialogue that I have heard many times in my life, at least, like if you talk about just talk about only abuse on a sexual level abuse, whether
Mhm.
it being like a childhood abuse, or like even in your teens, or like even after that, or even at this age. One common dialogue that I always hear from people, like, if you are not doing anything, why would they come and do all these things to you? I'm like, okay, if you are talking to me as a person now in this age, okay, I understand. If
Yeah.
I'm attracting somebody with my way of behavior, talk, or whatever, I get it. But when you're talking to me, as when I'm expressing, like, yes, I have this discomfort, or like I have this pain, I have gone through this trauma,
Mhm.
are you telling me, being an 80-year-old kid, or like 7-year-old kid, that I'm attracting like a 55-year-old man to come and do this to me?
No,
What
because
you're,
they're sick.
but I don't understand why that dialogue comes in. If you're not doing anything, they won't do anything to you. I'm like, okay, I really don't know how to answer that. Have you ever been into that kind of a situation?
I would tell you after speaking to many women, what I realize is people don't know what to say to a trauma survivor, a survivor of domestic abuse, sexual assault, rape. They really don't know what to say out of their mouths. And I take that back to the language that we need to use.
Exactly, exactly. It's not even about the trauma or like, see, for even for example, I don't have any trauma, but today
Right.
I'm coming to you like, okay, somebody at my office is like behind my ass. Sorry for my language, but yeah, somebody is just like, yeah, doing all this nonsense right next to me, and I'm having this discomfort to go to office, or like I might need to go to HR to complain on them about like, yeah, they're doing this to me. If I can't really go there, I have to prepare to go there. It's just not like, yeah, they're coming to me and then I'm running away.
Right.
I have a lot of other constraints. I might have a lot of other constraints, but as a friend or like as another person, if I'm sharing that with you, like, hey, I have this discomfort with this guy is always like coming and talking to me and
Mhm.
all this nonsense kind of a talk. I don't know what to do. The immediate jump on would be like, oh, if you're not doing anything to him, or like if you are not purposefully attracting him, why is he coming to you? Should I say like because he's an ass?
Exactly. Because see, a lot of people in the HR position do not, they lack the training and the knowledge and skills on how to deal with situations like that. And I
I'm
think
not
that
even talking about like going to the HR department. You just talk to your friend,
that
or like, somebody right sitting right next to you, like, yeah, hey, did you look at that guy? He's like always coming and talking to me. I don't know. I'm feeling discomfort.
right.
Then immediately their answer would be, I heard this many times actually. The
Well, what are
immediate,
you doing to them?
yeah, if
What were you wearing? And see,
you
but
are
see,
doing that,
that's what I'm saying, Smitha, where the conversation and the dialogue must change
exactly.
socially around. I mean, the whole structure, the dialogue has to change because immediately people feel as though the woman has done something to warrant that type of attention. I mean, I might want, I like looking nice. I want to jazz myself up some. I might put on some more makeup more than just my lips and my eyes. And, I might wear a form-fitting dress.
Yeah,
Does that mean that you have the right to say something out of context to me? Does that mean that you have the right to rub up against me or say something slick out your mouth? No, that doesn't give you the right to
you,
do
you
that. And
don't
I,
have the same
I didn't ask
context.
for that,
Yeah.
you
In
know?
the same context, actually, I have my son is 20-year-old now, and a couple of weeks back we were talking about something, and he somehow he got this conversation, and he was like, I don't understand why guys believe in this kind of a talk. And I'm like, what exactly that was? If a girl is posting their social media pictures with a bikini, for example, these guys think like these girls are asking for it. And he was like, can't a girl come and really ask for it if she wants to? Does she have to put her a picture with a bikini in the social media to ask for it? These guys don't even understand what a normal picture versus like asking for it.
Mm.
So yeah, when you're mentioning about that, that comes into my mind a lot. I don't understand if a dress means so much or like my makeup means so much. Why
Mhm.
is it that? I mean, I can be myself in whatever the way that I wanted to project.
Right,
If you
right.
are wearing a shorts, being a guy, that doesn't mean you are inviting somebody to rape you.
Exactly,
I don't
exactly.
understand that part.
But you hear that so much, like, what were you wearing?
Oh
What
yes,
did you do to provoke them?
yes,
What do you mean, what did I do? I just walked by. He grabbed my ass. Oh,
yep,
what, I mean, so until the world changes how they view
yep.
domestic violence, how they view women, until the world changes on how they view us as the feminine part of this world, then these things will always be questionable. These things will always come to light. We will always have, even from women, until woman starts to respect woman.
That is so so true. That is like a million percent truth point that I wanted to talk. That is so true. Like in workspace, you always we were told in a, I mean, we'll always hear that in conversation saying like, oh, is your boss a lady? Okay, that's it, you're done. Why is that? Why a boss lady cannot lead you? Or like why being a, I mean, if a guy is a boss, you are fine with that team,
Right.
but if the boss is like a lady, you will always have that stigma behind it saying, oh, you can't survive working for a lady boss.
Because this is how, this is taught to us.
Yeah.
It's always said women are catty. They're
Yeah.
catty with one another. You know, like I said, dialogue has to change.
For
And
being victims, I mean, I have even heard some of the guys being victims. It is just not like the woman when you are mentioning the way to look at a woman has to change, but the way to look at the other person has to change, first of
has
all.
to change. Absolutely.
It's not like
We
whether it is
can
a guy or a girl. If we can support other women first, start it with the person next to you, support them. If you don't
absolutely,
like them, leave them alone. You don't have to support, you don't have to even badmouth about them coming out. You don't really need to do that. Just leave them
absolutely,
to be. It doesn't matter.
absolutely. And that for me too, that's also that was a part of transformation for me.
Hmm.
Uh, Respecting, you know, my sisters, and seeing the man as, you're not better than me because you're a man. Because when I was in law enforcement, I always felt like they had a better lead than I was, because that I did, because they were the man and I was the female, and they respected the men more than they did me. But I had to change my way of thinking.
Yep.
I had to go into the situation saying, I'm respected as well. I'm
Hmm.
a police woman. He's a policeman, but I'm a police woman. And you're going to respect me as well. But I had to look at myself differently. And it takes time.
Yep.
It takes time. And like I said, when I started my journey, that journey of healing, that transformation, you something is uncovered every day.
That's so
I'm
true.
I'm still healing.
We still keep evolving every single day.
Yes, I'm still evolving. Put it that way. I'm still evolving. I like that word, evolving.
Yep.
Every day.
Yep.
It's not an overnight situation. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen. It might not happen in a couple of years.
Yep.
There is no time limit to a person's journey.
Yep.
And what I would say is my journey has become endless because I have endless work to do.
Yep. Journey is never going to end. It's like, yeah, it's a journey. That's the reason. It's never going to end until you are resting.
Exactly. And
So,
until I'm resting, my journey is forever. It's endless.
okay, thank you for tuning in, and you can find me on all the socials at Smitha Gunturi and the show notes for any resources mentioned. See you next week. Take care.